Then what?
I finally rest and watch the sunrise on a grateful universe. The hardest choices require the strongest wills.
I think you'll find our will equal to yours.
Our?
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Combat Meter. We're going to basically jump right into it today because this is going to be our third installment of the Thanos versus the Avengers series, trying to figure out if the Avengers actually stood a real chance against Thanos at any given time during their many encounters, or did it play out basically like the movies showed that it should have? So far we have seen that in his one-on-one confrontation with the Hulk, he basically wiped the floor with the Hulk, and that's how it should have gone. We also saw him take on the combined power of Star-Lord, Gilmore, Drax, and Mantis, and he basically walked through them. However, I have to make a slight amendment to my math and the way these points are calculated, because it was pointed out to me, and I believe rightly so, that giving one overall score for the team without taking into account the fact that there are multiple people in that team to contend with, therefore multiple people that must be defeated, and generally speaking can only be defeated one at a time, that there needed to be a way to account for the fact that there were multiple members. So I have now created a new bonus scoring track that we're going to call the team bonus. And the best way I found to calculate the team bonus was to give points based on the weakest link in the chain. So in every category, strength, speed, agility, intelligence, yada yada yada, I'm taking the weakest score from each one of those categories and creating a combined hero score, a good, solid, average score off of those, and the team would get that score added for every single team member they have. Meaning the more team members you have, the more free points are going to get thrown into your average, and you're only as strong as your weakest player. So that means that this point system should be the bare minimum that you're able to throw at the opponent. If none of that made any sense to you, I'm sorry, but it makes good sense to me, and it allows me to take into account how many team members are actually fighting on a given team. Of course, if you're interested in how the scoring works in general, you can see how the combat meter worked right here, and if you're curious to see how the last fight turned out, you can see that. Also, I have to make a quick amendment to the score, indicating now that in our last fight, Thanos got a 4.98. Taking the team dynamic into the mix, the new score for the combined might of Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, and Mantis is 4.49. Actually meaning they had a way better shot of victory, ultimately giving Thanos just over a 60% chance of victory. So yes, he was still the likely victor there, but there was a good 40% chance that they might have come out on top had they played that scenario out differently. Taking all that aside now, some of the members from that team are still going to be here in this fight with very little changes for their scores between then and now, but maybe some minor ones. As well as now adding to the mix 3 heavy hitters and 1 wild card. Those being Spider-Man, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Nebula. With no further ado, let's hit it! Alright, like we had said, some of the scores are going to stay essentially the same. Thanos' physical strength has not increased or decreased since his last encounter, meaning that his 5.75 points is going to stay. Star-Lord, same thing. He's still a highly athletic human who will get 2 points for his strength. Drax will keep his 4.6 points from last time, and Mantis will keep her 1 point from last time. The big shocker here is Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man has definitely grown in the MCU, and he seems to be increasing with power in basically every movie. This movie's coming off his previous adventure with Spider-Man Homecoming. And in Spider-Man Homecoming, he pulls off this magnificent feat. Friends over at Comic Books vs. the World, they also have done a video calculating this strength feat, and it's phenomenal. Believe it or not, of all the strength feats demonstrated in the MCU, this is one of the highest, this actually surpasses any demonstrable feat done by the Incredible Hulk or even by Thanos, meaning that Spider-Man himself up to this point might be the physically strongest opponent that Thanos has ever competed against. Now, while Peter Parker's strength definitely has its limits, we know that from this feat he is able to lift substantially more than 16,000 tons, which is our point cutoff, meaning that we are going to give him a solid and well-deserved 6 points for his physical strength. Thanos, we might just have a fight on our hands. Throwing into the mix now is Iron Man. The tricky part is trying to figure out how strong this specific suit that he's wearing is. While we've seen him wear suits that have helped him take on the likes of the Hulk before, it doesn't suggest that this suit is as strong as those. However, utilizing the suit itself as well as some of the suit's features, he's able to deliver some really powerful blows to Thanos, most importantly, this one.
All that for a drop of blood.
Now, in Thanos' mind, it's only a drop of blood, but it's literally more blood drawn than any other hero was capable of. Generally speaking, in order to draw blood on something, you need to be able to be as strong as that thing is durable. It's safe to say that in this instance, we can give Iron Man an equal footing for his max strength feat, giving him 5.75 points in strength, so he is right there on equal footing with Thanos. Doctor Strange is not really the physically strongest character. He's not unfit, but he doesn't really demonstrate any great feats of strength. We know that he exercises and that he stays fit, so it's safe to give him 1.5 points for having fit human strength. Nebula doesn't have too many strength feats that we can take into account, but she does clearly take on Gilmore on the regular, and in at least one case was able to overpower her. So it's safe to tie her on the strength level, giving her 4.5 points, thus giving her sustained enhanced strength. And given all of her robot parts and cybernetic enhancements, it's safe to say that that strength is certainly enhanced. So relying more heavily on Spider-Man's strength in this instance, they'll get a combined team score of 4.48. This means that in the midst of the fight, Thanos should consider every one of the opponents that he takes on to at least have enhanced strength, and probably be able to sustain that strength. Just like last time, Thanos is going to keep his speed feat of 5 points, because it's clear that he can achieve speeds that break the speed of sound, though he doesn't do it real consistently. Star-Lord will maintain his 4 points for having enhanced speed. Drax has 3.5 points for sustained top human speed, and Mantis her 3 points for being able to obtain top human speed. Spider-Man is wicked fast. His speed is better demonstrated when he is web slinging, because he can utilize the web like a slingshot to give himself additional speed and distance. This allows him to maneuver from one point to another very quickly, way faster than a person could possibly move. So it's clear that his speed is enhanced. Plus, his leaping ability gets him from one point to another exceedingly fast, and he doesn't really seem to tire out, so he could keep that up. So we'll give him 4.5 points for sustained enhanced speed. I had to be careful with Iron Man because he's actually achieved different speeds depending on which armor he's in. Now with this particular one, the Mark L or the Mark 50, we can see from Iron Man's wiki, link in the description below, that he's able to blast up to speeds of Mach 10. That's 10 times the speed of sound. So we know for a fact that he can break the speed of sound. The great thing is, it looks like with his power supply, he can sustain that more or less forever, provided his suit hasn't been damaged. But this is self-replicating, so I feel pretty safe giving him 5.5 points for sustained superhuman speed. Doctor Strange doesn't really demonstrate a speed feat more than what the typical human being can do, as long as you're maintaining a level of fitness, so we'll give him 1.5 points for having fit human speed. And Nebula, again, comparing her to her ability to take on Gilmore, doesn't really seem to demonstrate a feat of speed more than what she could do, but her enhancements certainly make her better than the typical person. So we'll give her 3.5 points for sustained top human speed. Leaning more heavily on Iron Man's speed here, that means that the team as a whole is going to get a 4.43 for their speed average. Again, meaning that when Thanos is fighting, he should assume that every one of these guys that he's fighting has some form of enhanced speed. Again, Thanos will keep his 5.75 points that he had before, giving him the ability to at least dodge bullets if he felt so compelled to do so. Star-Lord will keep his 3.5 points for having sustained top human agility. Drax will keep his 3 points for having top human agility. And Mantis will keep her 1.5 points for having fit human agility. Spider-Man's agility is remarkable. Dodging bullets is sort of easy for him, and a lot of this has to do with his quick reflexes and his heightened senses.
Can you even see in these?
Yes, I can't. Look, I can see in those, okay? It's just that when whatever happened, it's like my senses have been dialed to 11.
And a lot of it has to do with his spider sense, giving him a heightened awareness, bordering on precognition. So he easily is able to dodge bullets.
So what's up? You can dodge bullets but not bananas?
And his agility is one feat that he seems to be able to more or less sustain. So he'll get 5.5 points for sustained superhuman agility. Iron Man's agility is definitely beyond human capability, and a lot of this has to do with the sensory readings that he's able to get.
How about that?
In fact, when he is in flight, his agility is really superb. Definitely enhanced more than what the typical person could do. However, there's never been an indication that he's been able to dodge bullets. More often than not, he is absorbing bullet fire, simply through the strength of his suit. We even see in Civil War that he doesn't even really have the ability to dodge physical attacks coming in.
You can't beat him hand to hand.
At least not from the likes of someone like Captain America. Though, his ability to scan his opponent,
Analyze his fight pattern.
Scanning. Countermeasures ready.
and therefore create a battle plan against them, does kind of go into his agility a little bit. So it's safe to call him enhanced, and because of his suit's power functionality, it's pretty safe to assume that he can keep that up. So we'll give him 4.5 points for sustained enhanced agility. One of the areas that Doctor Strange actually has a little bit accentuated physical ability is in the agility department. Part of this has to do with his original hand-eye coordination that he had with a scalpel. Now, we see, of course, with the damage to his hands, he doesn't have that sort of precision anymore, but he still demonstrates a really good ability to dodge incoming attacks and counterattack, showing at the very least a highly athletic human agility. So he'll get 2 points for that. Nebula demonstrates a pretty high level of agility, especially if she's able to keep up with the likes of Gilmore, who we've already said is very agile and a very good fighter. So we'll give her 3.5 points for having sustained top human agility. Again, leaning heavily on Spider-Man for this one, the total score will come down to 4.14, meaning that Thanos should assume that all of his opponents have at least enhanced agility. So Thanos, once again, will keep his score of 4.5 points for his sustained enhanced intelligence. Star-Lord will keep his 2 points for his above-average intelligence, and Drax and Mantis will each keep their 0.85 points for being on the low end of the average human intelligence scale. On the plus side, some much more intelligent minds are about to jump into the mix. Spider-Man has demonstrated remarkable intelligence. This can be seen through every aspect of his story, from something that seems simple but is quite complex, like creating his webbing, all the way to in the future creating biological cures for different villains' superpowers and syndromes. He has an amazing engineering mind and is clearly top of the line, so we will give him 3 points for having top human intelligence. Tony Stark, even smarter yet. Tony does seem to be able to remember details from quite a while ago.
But I think I can figure this out, yeah. I almost had this 20 years ago when I was drunk. I think I can get you better.
But he also forgets simple things a lot of the times.
Tony Stark, great speech, man.
I gave a speech. How was it? Edifying.
Unintelligible.
So it's clear that he doesn't have a photographic memory. That might only be because it's hindered by the use of alcohol. Hard to say. But he is clearly one of the biggest geniuses that Marvel has to offer. He's only really smarter than Spider-Man because he's had more time and more resources than Spider-Man has had. Given the time and the resources, Spider-Man could easily be as smart, if not smarter, than Tony Stark. So he'll get a slight edge over Peter, mostly because of experience. So we'll give him 3.25 points for his intelligence. This might irk a few people. In my opinion, and what I believe is demonstrated, Doctor Strange is actually smarter than Tony Stark. I know. You gotta remember, intelligence is not always indicated by good decision making. If we're talking strictly book intelligence, this is a man that became the most successful surgeon in his field, an authority on it, and then in a matter of months became Sorcerer Supreme. He went from not believing in something.
I do not believe in fairy tales about chakras or energy or the power of belief. There is no such thing as spirit. We are made of matter and nothing more.
To being the best there was at it in a matter of months. That is someone who demonstrates having photographic memory response. So he is going to get 3.5 points for having a photographic memory. Nebula is not a dummy by any stretch, but she doesn't really demonstrate a high level of intelligence either.
I'm hungry. Can you say that Yara root? No, it's not ripe yet.
It's not ripe.
Well, hello, boys. It's not ripe.
A lot of this is because she's very emotionally led, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But based on what we can actually see, she's at least as smart as a clever human.
This is the one? Seriously?
Your choices were him or a tree.
And so she'll get 1.5 points for having clever human intelligence. Leaning into Doctor Strange here, this means that the group overall is going to have 2.64 points. Meaning that Thanos should assume that every one of his opponents, at the very least, is a genius. So Thanos will keep his 5 points for the superhuman healing. Star-Lord will keep his 4 points for having enhanced healing. Drax his 5 points for his superhuman healing. Mantis her 3 points for her top human healing. Then we get into Spider-Man, who does seem to sustain injuries, but he recovers from them much quicker than a person normally would. So we can give him 4 points for enhanced healing. Tony Stark is interesting because as a human, he only heals as fast as a human does. You could say that he is fit because he does work out and try to keep himself relatively healthy. So he would have fit human healing. However, he's wearing that suit that with its nanotechnology is instantaneously creating a new barrier again and rebuilding itself all the time, which would essentially give him super healing. But because the man inside still takes damage, we're going to average it out. And between the two, give him 3.75 points for having top human healing that's going toward enhanced. Which sort of makes sense, because while the suit will take damage and repair, the damage that he took still remains. Doctor Strange is actually in a really similar boat, because he himself would probably have fit human healing. At the same time, it has been implied that through magical means, he could heal and recover.
He channels dimensional energy directly into his own body.
He uses magic to walk.
Constantly.
Basically instantaneously if he so chooses.
So I could have my hands back again. My old life.
You could.
In fact, we see this, that while he has injuries here, right before he gets dusted, when they come back for the final battle, those injuries are no longer there, which does suggest that he took the time to magically heal himself. Again, we're going to average out there, give him a score of 3.75, suggesting that he has top human healing all the way up to enhanced. The real healer of the group arrives in the form of Nebula. Nebula may not be the most durable, but she demonstrates an ability to bounce back like no other. We actually, many times throughout her history, watch her heal and recover. It's pretty remarkable. It seems that her cybernetic systems start recovering basically instantaneously, and within a few seconds, she can be right back to full health. So she's actually going to get the full maximum 6 points for having a super healing. So relying on her ability to recover, this means the group as a whole will get 5.07 points, meaning that Thanos should assume that every one of his combatants has at the very least superhuman healing, and actually should have the ability to recover even easier than he would. So Thanos will keep the 4 points that he has before, because that reality stone really does give him the ability to mess with people, allowing him to manipulate his enemies' thoughts by creating very real constructs. Star-Lord and Drax will each keep their 2 points for being able to predict their enemies' moves. And Mantis will keep her 5 points for being able to cause massive mental suggestion. Spider-Man's fascinating because he's a trash talker who gets under his enemy's skin.
Hey guys, the illegal weapons deal ferry was at 10:30. You missed it.
He has a very mathematical mind.
Wait a minute. Is that an Archimedean spiral? The mirror dimension is just geometry? You're great at geometry. You can do geometry.
Is a pretty good strategist.
Hey guys, you ever seen that really old movie? Empire Strikes Back? You know that part? Where they're on the snow planet? With the walking thingy? Yes!
And to top it all off, he has his spider sense, which alerts him to danger. This allows him to really be able to predict his enemies' moves to the point where it almost feels like he can read their minds and know what they're going to do next. Between his enhanced senses and his spider sense, he's actually bordering on precognition. So he'll get 2.5 points for his mind control, being able to predict his enemies' moves almost to the point of reading their thoughts. Iron Man is sort of fascinating. I kind of actually thought he would have a higher score than this when I looked into it. But the truth is, he seems to be able to read his enemies' moves. That seems clear enough. Even to the point of scanning his enemies' fighting patterns so he can create a strategy against them.
Countermeasures ready.
Let's kick his ass.
Also, his scanning system makes him very aware of where his enemies are most of the time, and yet he doesn't seem to be able to predict what his enemies are going to do next. People still get the drop on him a lot. He's often being bested by objectively less powerful opponents. So while his scanning systems give him a good one-up, it doesn't really go much further than that. So he'll get 1.5 points for being able to read his enemies' moves to the point of almost being able to predict them. Doctor Strange is a real fascinating one. Now, while he has been able to take glimpses into the future,
Tony, there was no other way.
which can go a long way toward one's ability to control your opponent's mind, he actually has magical spells that can influence the mind. Now, up to this point, he's never demonstrated the ability to read minds or seize control of them, but his powers are online with the Reality Stone. He is manipulating reality in such a way that it really screws with people and can manipulate their thoughts.
He's in Norway. Just seeing whether this incantation requires any Asgardian modifications. Nope. Oh, we don't need that.
So we'll give him 4 points to be able to manipulate his enemy's thoughts. Nebula, like any good fighter, can read her enemy's moves, but she doesn't have any particular defense against it, and she doesn't seem to have any predictive abilities, so we'll give her 1 point for being able to read the enemy moves. This will give the team as a whole a score of 3.29, relying a bit more heavily on Mantis in this area. Meaning that if Thanos is going to be careful, he needs to assume that every opponent that he faces may have the ability to at least read his thoughts. So, like we had said before, with utilizing the stones as essentially magical objects, and because the stones respond to Thanos simply by his will, he'll keep his 6 points for having magical mastery. Star-Lord will keep his 2 points for understanding some magical concepts. Drax will keep his 1.5 for having a magical familiarity. Mantis will keep her 2 points for understanding some magical concepts. Interestingly, Spider-Man does not seem to be very shocked to discover that there is a wizard that he has to go save.
Kid, that's the wizard. Get on it.
He seems to just kind of go with it. Now, he does live in a pretty supernatural world, so he at least has a familiarity, but I think it's safe to say that he actually understands some magical concepts. Some of this is demonstrated later when he actually has this confrontation with Doctor Strange himself in Spider-Man No Way Home. where he discovers that magic and science are actually not that far removed.
Hey, Strange! You know what's cooler than magic? Math!
So he'll get 2 points for understanding some magical concepts. Tony Stark accepts that he lives in a magical world, but he has a pretty non-magical mind.
Okay, anybody on our side hiding any shocking and fantastic abilities they'd like to disclose? I'm open to suggestions.
And he's also dealt with the likes of Thor, though Thor himself has expressed that magic is simply a greater level of science that humans don't understand.
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
So Tony Stark will get 1.5 points for having magical familiarity. Doctor Strange, on the other hand, is the Sorcerer Supreme. This is a guy who rocks out magic. Now, it's safe to say that he has quite the mastery over magic. However, he doesn't seem to have limitless magical ability. There are definitely rules, confines, and limits to what he is able to do. We see this because he's gone up against other characters who seem to have a greater level of magical control than he does. But he's really up there and close to that level. So we'll bridge the distance and give him 6.5 points for having magical mastery, but a high level of it. Nebula, being pretty familiar with some of the magical concepts around her, will also get 2 points, giving the team an overall score of 3.43. Meaning that Thanos better watch out, because that means that everyone he fights again, he should at least assume is using some sort of magical item, and maybe knows some spells. So this is the first area where Thanos is actually going to change his score a little bit. It seems that he has basically the same feelings about each and every one of these opponents.
Insect.
We see at the end of the fight that he's more than willing to bargain for people's lives.
Spare his life, and I will give you the stone.
No tricks.
But it's safe to give him a kill response of 4 across the board, meaning that he'll fight to win at all costs. And that seems very consistent with Thanos' character in general. Star-Lord, on the other hand, has actually changed this time around. With Gilmore missing, he is far more eager to get some answers and inflict some violence and damage onto Thanos. But he also seems eager to gloat and demonstrate that he beat Thanos.
I thought you'd be hard to catch. For the record, this is my plan.
So we're going to give him 5 points for being willing to kill, but favoring cruelty. One has to remember that cruelty does not necessarily mean that you're torturing your opponent, but it means more that you want to inflict pain, either physical or psychological, on your opponent. Drax will safely keep his 6 points for being actively attempting to kill Thanos. And Mantis seems to have taken the fight a little more seriously. While she again is not much of a fighter, she does demonstrate a willingness to get right into the fray, as it's all part of the plan. And she is holding on to him with everything she's got, even saying,
"Be quick, he is very strong."
Meaning she knows she can't keep him there forever, but she's in it for the long haul. So it's safe to give her 3 points, because she's willing to fight until the opponent submits or dies. Now, Spider-Man up to this point has actually been a really quite interesting combatant for Thanos to have to take on. However, this is where he starts to falter. A lot of his kill response being low has to do with the fact that he's young. He's a kid. He's not interested in killing anybody, especially human people. Now, he does show later that he doesn't seem to mind as much killing what appears to be mindless monsters.
Activate instant kill!
Or at the very least, non-human threats. But again, he demonstrates even later yet, even the monstrous people he considers people. And he wants to help more than hurt.
I can't promise you guys anything, but at least this way you actually get to go home and have a chance, a second chance. I mean, come on, isn't that worth trying?
It's one of the greatest parts about his character. He's a real hero, he just wants to help. So he's probably the only one on the battlefield who would actively avoid killing his opponent. But we have seen a willingness, at least with non-humans, to kill as a last resort. So we're going to bridge the gap and give him 1.75 points in this area. Iron Man is on a different level. His very first move in this is attempted murder.
Piece of cake, Quill. Yeah, if your goal was to piss him off.
Now, it doesn't go well, but he never lays off the rest of the time. Every action he takes is an attempt to kill his opponent, and he is doing it without hesitation. We know that Tony really takes this fight personally. He's seen the invasion force in the past. He wants to take care of what he considers the greatest threat that the human race has to face, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So we're giving him the full 7 points for being willing to kill without hesitation. Doctor Strange is an interesting one. He has the big picture in mind. So yeah, if it were possible to kill Thanos right here and now, he would do it. But that doesn't really seem to be what he's interested in. He wants the big victory. And, as he said himself, he had seen
14,605,000.
How many did we win?
So it's clear to say that he'll get 4 points because he will fight to win at all costs. Nebula went for the biggest blow that she could on her first outing, just like Iron Man did. She crashed her ship into him at the risk of her own life, then came out fighting. She did demand to know where Gilmore was, but she also is not hesitating to lay as much hurt on Thanos as she can, as quickly as she can, suggesting it's safe to give her 7 points for also being willing to kill without hesitation. This gives the team a score of 5.82, considerably higher than Thanos in this area, which means that every single one of his opponents he should assume is looking to kill him, but more importantly, looking to hurt him. It seems safe that this is what he assumes about his opponents as well, but feeling very confident, he's a bit nonchalant about it. Now, originally, I was actually going to change this score. With Spider-Man, Iron Man, and particularly Doctor Strange entering the mix, Thanos' abilities seem to become less insurmountable than they were before. Except that Thanos is actually coming into this with another one of the stones. He only demonstrates utilizing this stone one time, and it's right here. He uses it to identify the real Doctor Strange, so he can target him, and almost knocks his spirit out of his body, similar to the magic that we had seen Doctor Strange himself wield. This ability to meet Doctor Strange's amazing magics and Iron Man's amazing technologies at every level means that once again, he's going to keep that full 7 points for having some insurmountable advantages that they'd have to overcome. Star-Lord, of course, will keep his 1 point for having some unique advantages that he brings to the mix. Drax, unfortunately, is going to stay with 0, having no real unique advantages. Mantis keeps her 4 points for having formidable advantages to bring into the fight. Spider-Man is a bit of a unique throw into the mix because despite being young and inexperienced for the most part, his combined strength, speed, agility, enhanced senses, and the advent of his iron spider suit, so he'll get 2 points for having several unique advantages that he brings to the mix. Same thing with Iron Man. That nanotech suit is actually going to go a long way to helping him, so he too will get 2 points for having several unique advantages. I think most people can agree that the most even keel part of the fight actually seemed to be a one-on-one battle between Thanos and Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, wielding the full might of his magic, has really formidable advantages here, and is probably the one who came the closest to individually defeating Thanos, thus giving him 5 points for having some very dangerous advantages. Nebula knows Thanos really well, and knowing an opponent is half the battle, so that can at least give her 1 point for some unique advantages. Beyond that, though, she's not really throwing anything at Thanos that he isn't completely familiar with, and he doesn't care about her in the same way he cared about Gilmore. This will give the team an overall score of 2.14. This means that Thanos should assume that every one of his opponents has at least several unique advantages they can throw at him. So Thanos is going to keep his 3 points that he had before from being a highly trained fighter, and that seems to pay off. In fact, at one point he's actually taking on both Doctor Strange and Drax at the same time, blindfolded, further demonstrating his physical power and his high level of training. Star-Lord and Drax will keep their 2.5 points each for being experienced trained fighters, and Mantis will keep her 0.5 point for being able to fight if her life depended on it. Looking at Spider-Man's fighting prowess, there's a great video breakdown by Godzilla Rex, link in the description, where he breaks down all of Spider-Man's fighting styles leading up to this moment. Spider-Man in and of himself has not really received any formal training. However, he does demonstrate feats that are only really found in trained fighters. He seems to have an affinity for gymnastics and professional wrestling. A lot of this has to do with his natural agility mixed with his strength. But he does lack the overall experience that a lot of these other fighters have.
That would explain the rigidity-flexibility ratio, which, gotta say, that's awesome.
I don't know if you've been in a fight before, but there's usually not this much talking.
All right, sorry, my bad.
So we'll give him a safe 2 points for being a trained fighter. Iron Man is fascinating. We definitely see that he trains in combat. Seen here with him practicing his boxing skills.
What the hell was that?
It's called mixed martial arts. It's been around for 3 weeks.
It's called dirty boxing. It's nothing new about it.
It's clear that he practices Wing Chun in his free time. We've actually seen him fight either with minimal armor or without armor altogether. His marksmanship is also superb. A lot of these abilities are augmented by his suit, again, going back to this moment in Civil War where he can analyze a fight pattern and therefore make a plan against it. This is something that borderlines on being an expert at combat in general, but at the very least it shows a demonstration of him being highly trained. So we're going to bridge the gap here and give him 3.5 points for being a highly trained fighter who's bordering on being an expert. We do see that Doctor Strange actually has received martial arts training. And like so many of the other feats that his brilliant mind achieves, he's able to actually start mastering this pretty quickly. In fact, in the first Doctor Strange movie, we see that he relies more heavily on his martial arts training and augments that with his magical abilities, whereas later he relies much more on his magical abilities, augmenting it with his martial arts experience. But we can see that he is definitely a trained fighter and has the experience fighting other people who are as well, if not better trained than him. So he'll get 2.5 points for being an experienced trained fighter. Nebula also has a lot of experience fighting and has received a high level of training. I can't go so far as calling her an expert. She does seem to get bested by people as often as she defeats them herself. But it's safe to give her 3.5 points for being a highly trained fighter bordering on being an expert. So relying a bit more heavily on Iron Man and Nebula's fighting prowess, overall the team will get a 2.93, meaning that Thanos needs to treat every one of these opponents like they're an experienced trained fighter on the verge of being highly trained. So as Thanos demonstrates, with the stones in his hands, he has basically got limitless invulnerability. That is the ability to withstand a nuclear detonation at its apex. That seems pretty clear. That's not to say that he could do that without the stones, but he's using them, so we gotta give credit where credit's due. Star-Lord's gonna keep his 4 points for having enhanced resistance. Drax will keep his 5.5 points for having a high level of superhuman invulnerability. Mantis will keep her 1.5 points for having some protection, all the way to minor damage resistance. Spider-Man, on the other hand, wow. So to get up to 6 points and be considered super invulnerable, you have to at least be able to withstand a train impact. Spider-Man's one of the few that we've actually seen sustain a train impact. And actually, he ended up coming out of this basically unscathed, unhurt. Or if he was, his enhanced healing allowed him to recover pretty quickly. Plus, he's wearing his Iron Spider suit, which is giving him even more strength. Could it be so much as to give him 7 points for being limitless in his invulnerability? No, that's not likely, and it doesn't even seem to be demonstrated. But I feel very safe giving him those full 6 points for being super invulnerable. Iron Man, on the other hand, gets hit by this. and comes back for more. Maybe that's not a nuclear detonation, but dang if that wasn't something that should have just killed everybody. Clearly that's more than what a train impact would be. But based on the destruction that is caused, it doesn't seem to be like taking the nuke at its apex. So we're going to bridge the gap here and give him 6.5 points for his invulnerability. Doctor Strange has a bit of an odd one here again, because as far as his invulnerability is concerned, he's basically just wearing clothes. So he would have your standard minor protection. At the same time though, he's able to produce force fields that can block incoming damage very effectively, I might add. We already know that Thanos can break the sound barrier with his strikes. Is this consistent? No, he actually has to generate a spell to do it. So we'll bridge the gap here again a bit and give him 3.75 as a score. This gives him high advanced resistance, meaning that anywhere from being bulletproof to taking a small explosive, is pretty safe for him. Nebula also demonstrates really high levels of durability. She has vehicular accidents all the time. She's crashing ships constantly. So we know she can take those kind of impacts. Despite the fact that she's constantly recovering, she can receive damage and receive enough of it to be taken out of a fight. So knowing that she could withstand a general vehicular impact, but not being certain if she could withstand a train impact, we're going to bridge the gap and give her 5.5 points. So relying heavily on Iron Man's invulnerability here, they're going to get an overall score of 5.61. Meaning that Thanos should assume that everyone that he is fighting has superhuman invulnerability and could withstand a vehicular impact. Meaning Thanos, everyone that you hit is probably going to be able to take it at least once. And this actually seems kind of fair. More often than not, when he's fighting these opponents, he hits them and they go down, and they have to take a little bit of time to recover and come back into the fight.
You throw another moon at me, and I'm gonna lose it.
And usually he's only delivering about 1 to 2 blows per person. Thanos has been consistently getting the experience bonus, mostly due to his age and how long he's been ruling and conquering. Doctor Strange does something really interesting here, though. He revisits this same scenario 14 million times. We know that it isn't just this 10-minute battle. It actually goes beyond this, which means there's probably some scenarios of the snap that he lived through and some where he didn't. If we assume that this individual battle took about 10 minutes, and we assume that the big massive battle at the end took quite a bit longer, as massive battles tend to, it's probably safe to assume that there's roughly an hour in there. Let's assume, because it's a 50-50 chance about whether or not you're going to get snapped, let's assume that in half of these scenarios, Doctor Strange got snapped away, and in half of them, he did not. Now, we don't know if the big battle at the end always took place or didn't always take place, but it's safe to assume maybe that some version of it did. Because the remaining Avengers, no matter which group you got, were certainly never going to give up without an opportunity to try to take out Thanos. Half of those scenarios, he'd seen approximately an hour of event unfold. That means that there's 7,302.5 hours of experience that he gained in there. These, of course, are all the scenarios he got snapped away from and potentially came back to. Meaning that just looking at that scenario, those hours, he gained 799 years of experience. Now, assuming he didn't get snapped away for the other half, and knowing that it didn't pan out, that means he got to see up to 5 years into the future, which means there's actually over 7 million versions of this where he got to see about 5 years of time. Or 35,001,513 years. Combined with his now paltry sum of 799 years, this means that Doctor Strange got to experience about 35,002,312 years of battling Thanos. But I want to be fair. Maybe Doctor Strange didn't see that far. Maybe in half of those scenarios, he died before we ever even got to the snap. He died right in this battle. let's assume in at least half of these scenarios, he doesn't get to see that far because he doesn't make it. It would still give him, I'm sorry, Thanos, you just lost the experience bonus. Of course, Thanos will get a -1 because his enemies are using weapons. Both sides will get -2 because they have to contend with their enemy's power. Now, we get the unique team bonus, which, taking the weakest areas of every single one of these categories, then multiplying that average hero score by the number of people on the team, that means they get an additional team bonus of 8.97 points to add to the mix. Neither side is bringing a strictly unique weakness to the other, and let's see how that totals out. This gives Thanos an average hero score of 4.91 and gives the team a hero score of 4.81. Ah! So what does that mean? What it means is even though Thanos is still the likely winner, there was only a 52% chance that he comes out on top. It's almost 50-50. There's a 48% chance that the Avengers could have stopped him right here and now. In 14 million possibilities, Doctor Strange only saw one outcome. He spent millions of years looking for possible alternatives and came up with one outcome where they win? One? Now, I don't want to speculate too much on how that could be or why that is. It's possible that at this point right here, if they had gotten the gauntlet away from Thanos, it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe some of them still died, maybe his army still came through, maybe in the long run it's not really a victory. Like it said, there's many possibilities where there may have been an actual victory, but Doctor Strange personally dying means that he couldn't have seen that victory, so he can't count it as a win if he's not there to know about it. It's possible Tony Stark had to live through this no matter what, which seems fair, considering that's the bargain he ultimately makes with Thanos. But as it's been demonstrated by the filmmakers with Thanos' capabilities, even with the stones, and the capabilities of these heroes, it seems unlikely to me that this was a surefire victory for Thanos. There should have and could have been many ways that Thanos lost this fight, and feel free to speculate about them in the comments below. Thanks everybody for watching this episode of the Combat Meter. Tune in next time where we see if there was another opportunity that our heroes might have had to defeat Thanos. And of course, if you have any other matchups that you would like to see, either from a movie or a TV show that just didn't settle well with you, or a fantasy battle that you'd love to see acted out, feel free to comment below. Thanks, and keep fighting the good fight.